Right, guys. Hello, hello, hello. I think this is the third call. I'm going to say third call. We had a break because it was bank holiday, so I hope everybody had a tremendous bank holiday. We've got another one. God, they come thick and fast, don't they? Wow, that is a good opener, Matt. Fuck me, that's dull. Today is we did some stuff on we did an opening session program, a little bit about the program. We did some stuff on nutrition. Again, I think, you know, as another group that you've got to be part of and interact with. So I just going to take no news as good news, and everything that I said, although I do ramble a bit, kind of makes sense. And I hope that has made sense. Ed, you're on call today, so I wasn't being facetious when I asked you those two questions, but hopefully you did, that got you thinking around the lines. So we'll maybe go into that at the end, and I will cover it if you need a little bit more from me. Today is going to be about training, specifically about the effort level of training. There's two technical bits that I want to talk about with something called RPE and RIR. So if you want to take notes as usual, you can do homework, that's fine. If not, you can listen back to this call. Under my model, the Stronger by Nurture model, which is my sort of one-to-one business, I talk about movement, exercise, and training, and I think I've been over those things. So when you are training, effort is more important. It has, obviously, you have set the direction of what you want to achieve, and so how do you know whether you're putting in the right effort? I, in my own training, have used percentages from time to time. When I was really into doing a program called 531, and if you've spent any time in the gym, you've probably heard somebody talk about the 531 program or West Side Barbell. Basically, percentages can be useful if you kind of like numbers, but they are just a bit of a circle jerk. Is if you're not competing in, say, powerlifting, which is fucking niche. To be any good at it is very niche, and you're well out of my remit. It doesn't mean I haven't had success with them, but people do tend to sort of obsess over the percentages. What I do like for normal people is using RPE and RIR, and I will go over those now. So RPE is representation of perceived effort. Really basic. A scale of 1 to 10 could not be simpler. We do it with everything. How hot is this food? A scale of 1 to 10. How happy are you? 1 to 10. It gives you enough range to be to be quite detailed. 1 to 5 would probably not be enough. And the scale goes like this. 1 is you might as well not be in the gym, and 10 is a max effort. A max effort to me means that you cannot do another rep with good form. The better your form is, the more that may look like you just can't do another rep. So if I've got somebody who's inexperienced, I might say, take this to technical failure, and then I make a subjective call on that. And as we continue, as we get to know each other better, and they continue to train, and they gather more experience, hopefully their efficiency in the gym gets better. They're training and they're able to hold form throughout, and they're able to push that effort into the right areas, whether that's an isolation exercise, one joint, or a multi-joint exercise, compound exercise. Form doesn't change, they just can't do it. They just can't produce the contraction. So it's a very easy scale. The other scale is RIR, which is reps in reserve. Now that's only really been in my life for, I don't know, maybe like the last 3 or 4 years. To some people, they mean the same thing, all right? And I use them almost interchangeably. I've never had somebody complain, but then I also generally train very, very Gen Pop people. So they just need to work. They just need to come in and get the work done. You guys are a bit more experienced, and so you may find that you lean towards one or the other. But reps in reserve, I might say, okay, leave 1 in the tank, or 1 rep in reserve. 0 is a max effort. And so you can see how, can anybody hear that clicking? What's going on here? Can anybody hear like the noise like a cricket would make, or is that just me? No, you're fine. All right, fine. I continue. Where was I? RIR. Yeah, so 0 is a max effort, and a 5 RIR is leave 4 reps before failure. Okay. One of those may speak to you better. I don't think it really matters. The point I want to get across today is what is the correct effort level that you need to be putting in order to put in the stimulus that you need to grow, regardless of the number of reps that I might prescribe. So if I say 5 reps and I want you to do it to an RPE of 10, that means that you can't do 6. And if I say let's do 10 reps and I say 2 RIR, then that means that you should be able to do 12, all right, with that load. Making sense for those people who are on the call? Yeah? So those are the scales that I use. And so what does that really mean? Where do you need to be in order to grow? So the science says that you don't need to train to failure. All right? You don't need to train to failure. And so that's not supported in the literature. But it's also, for me, it's also when you are going to failure, even if your technique is good, you are obviously running a sort of a risk reward kind of vibe. All right. If you don't have spotters, that kind of stuff. The other point is that if it's not really supported in the literature, for every rep you do over the stimulus threshold, so you've reached the threshold where you've got the stimulus you want, but you just keep going anyway, that is then adding extra fatigue. And that's extra fatigue directly into the muscles that you're training on the day, but then you accumulate sort of fatigue from week to week. So you've just done phase 1. By the time you get through phase 2, I would expect if you guys are managing to do the 6 days that I've programmed, you will start really pulling back, or the conditioning days will start. You'll be like, just not ready to, I'm too tired. But you're not necessarily tired at the end of, you're not necessarily broken at the end of a session, like you're not hobbling out of the gym, but you've just got less energy to give because you are borrowing energy to put into the training, right? So you do have to kind of think about that. For every rep that you'd go over the required stimulus, you may be just making a rod for your own back further down the line. Now, it is my experience that doesn't mean that you should never go to failure. In fact, if your technique is sound and you need to know, the only way to know whether you're 2 reps from failure is to know where failure is. So from a testing point of view, right, it may be worth doing, but it's not necessary. I personally believe that, like, if you're kind of new to the gym or new to these scales, then what I would do is just train consistently and then keep a log of what you're doing, maybe a video here or there, and eventually you just get better at training. All right, as long as you keep those things in mind, which is, I want to see my weights going up, I want to see the volume of work that I'm doing going up, and if those things are going up, you're going in the right direction. And the more time you practice thinking about RPE or reps in reserve, the better calibrated you are. Sure, if you go to failure, then it's obviously shorter, but you may feel that the risk reward isn't right for you, or you feel that you kind of buy into this idea that you're just accumulating unnecessary fatigue. And this is a long game. It's a process game. It's not a destination thing. So hopefully we've written a program that you're enjoying and that you are seeing progress, the long-term progress that you want, in which case just chill out a bit. All right, I'm all cool with that. But I spend a lot of time in the gym, and I have a certain type of experience-based personality. Other people just need to know. Like, I would expect Mills to just want to know. For example, he's the kind of personality who would just want to know, and that would be so. Lean to what you want to go to. What else did I want to say on that? I think I like these scales because they're simple, particularly the RPE scale. So if we focus on that one, you may have heard this term autoregulation. Okay, so autoregulation is it's how you go in on one day and just think subjectively, how do I feel today? And you may say, right, I'm feeling pretty tired. And then you test how tired you are by doing your first couple of sets. And if it's then shows you that actually you are quite tired, you can pull back on the weight, but you can still work to the same effort level, right? So let's say you do a bench press at 60 kilos, you go in, you do your first set and you think, fuck me, I'm absolutely goosed here. Drop it down to 50. And then you would do extra reps so that you would then work to, if I say then I want you to work to an 8 out of 10 effort, you drop it down to 50 and then you just do 8 out of 10 effort with 50. Now that might mean that you're doing extra reps, but it doesn't matter, because what matters is it's the effort level that is important here, okay, from a session, like in the acute session. And the reason that's important is because that effort level sort of dictates the amount of stimulus that you're providing. And in order to put yourself into a sort of physiological state to be what we call anabolic, which means just in a muscle building state, you need to work like 8 RPE to 10 RPE. We've just discussed why 10 RPE might not always be the best idea, certainly not to be running it all the time. So, but somewhere between that 8 and 10 is where you want to be on your working sets, okay? But if you do go in and you've had a shitty night's sleep like me, if I go to the gym today, I'm just not going to be as good as I was when I had some great sleep. So that's an acute thing. My son's been up, we've been sick, I've had a busy day and I haven't been able to eat. And so I might just go in and say, right, okay, so I might not be able to do the weights that I was doing last time, but I don't need to freak out about that. I just work to that right effort level. I know I've provided the stimulus, and then I just get out of the gym and I go and eat. All right. And that is basically auto-regulation. And that's why I like that scale. How hard do you need to work if you're using the RIR? Well, I think the anabolic state starts normally at around about 2 to 4 reps in reserve, okay? And the reason we have a little bit more of a sort of a range there is because it probably matters how much you're lifting, your experience, and the quality of rep that you're doing. You know as well as I do, hopefully, that not all press-ups are the same. You see those fuckers with those like hardly bending their elbows kind of thing. Or another example would be somebody doing a squat who is my height at 6 foot versus somebody who's doing a squat at 5'6". That bar is just moving over a greater distance. It's causing more fatigue per each rep. So that person might only need to go to 4 reps in reserve. Another person might need, the person who's moving it over less range might need to go to 2. All right. With all of these things, everything that I'm saying, it's all a little bit of an art anyway. All right. We do have literature that says and supports it, but it's still sort of the general trend. There's so many other factors that are in play each time you go to the gym. All right, how much sleep you've had, are you fed well, are you moving well, all those kinds of things. What's your mindset like? Yeah. So when you're using RIR, or if I do it because I'm a bit naughty and I just interchange it without giving any reason on the program sometimes, then you get, somewhere in the region, your working sets would want to be 2 to 4 reps before failure. What if they're not? I hear you say, what if it's my first 2 sets, it's fine. Don't worry, because you will get better at training the more you train. Even if you go to the gym 3 days a week and you've been doing that for the last 10 years, if this is the first time you've ever heard this stuff, this is going to blow your mind once you trigger it in. All right. If you've only been going to failure and that's the only way that you've been able to train, now knowing that you don't have to go at that hard might mean that you'll be able to train longer, better and longer than you would otherwise if you're always like really going for it and you're like, fuck me, every 3 weeks I just feel fucking shit. Like, yeah, because you're doing too many reps. You're working almost too hard. You don't need to work that hard. All right. I told you this was going to be a little bit all over the place. Other ways that you can tell, right? A little bit more subjective, all right, but other ways that you can tell whether you are in the sweet spot, all right, are you working hard enough? So if after a session you can't, let's say you do a leg session, right? On one of the days where I think it's on the Friday where you've got the Bulgarians, fuck me, they're brutal, right? If you can't sit down on the toilet without like wrapping your tie around the door and sort of belaying yourself in because your legs are so sore, then that's too much. And the reason it's too much is because you will not be able to then go and train those muscles again for a long period of time. All right. So the idea is to provide enough stimulus that you can then recover from and then stimulate again. If every time you were absolutely slamming yourself, you can only really recover from the work. You don't get the growth bit afterwards. Okay. So soreness, people quite, you normally get it in like novice lifters, mainly because any sort of soreness and they're like, oh my God, I'm so sore. If you've been around a while and you've been really, really sore, you just know that it just can't be good. There must be another way. So, soreness, if you can't, if it's so sore that you don't feel like you're recovering very well from it, that's too much. But at the same time, and this is why it always depends, and there's a general, these things are general trend, is that if you're never sore, you're probably not training hard enough. All right. So there's a sweet spot there. That is a subjective thing. What I tend to do is I use this in session, I'll use RPE or RIR. I am also a bit mentally weak, so I film sets from time to time, particularly the AMRAPs. And if you haven't done that yet, I would implore you to do it, particularly with the trap bar. And the reason for that is when I did the first one at 65%, I didn't know what my my 1 rep max is, so I was sort of just estimating, and I was there or thereabouts, all right, but I ended up doing a lot of reps, so it was like 30, maybe even more than that, and I felt my head go. I could feel the burn in my legs. But luckily I filmed it. And in my mind, I was like, oh, I've got to put this down. I've got to put this down. It's got really hard. I feel really slow. When I watched it back, every rep was exactly the fucking same. But my internal voice was saying, or my internal experience was saying, this is really hard. But what it looked like, the external output of that, it was a terrible calibration. So I didn't freak out. I just made sure that I realized that what I feel in my head sometimes, and it's the same when I do the air bike, all right, is not necessarily what is happening out there. When it feels really slow, it doesn't always mean that it's really slow, all right? It doesn't mean you're as tired as you think you are, okay? Sometimes you might feel like, oh, I've kept really good form there, and you look at it and you look like a dog having a shit, doing a deadlift, and you're like, yeah, that's probably not ideal. Again, those kind of people probably would want to use those videos in order to make sure that they don't do things that maybe if you kept doing them wouldn't be so good. I don't want to nocebo people and say that you're going to get injured. I think we've moved on past that. Certainly in my experience, the videos help me make sure that I am not cutting myself short, because I am a bit of a pussy. All right. So I use the RIR, I use the RPE, I use filming every now and again. I'm not saying you've got to get a fucking tripod up every time, because that is annoying and it's a waste of time and it slows everything down. But in this program, you've got a great opportunity with the AMRAPs to do it. And then I also listen to my body afterwards. How sore am I? Okay. And then with all of that information, I can then build a better picture for me that makes my training experience over the long term much, much better. And I can tell you now that starting in October on this training journey, rather than just exercising, my sessions have become more efficient. I just look better in the gym. That's also because of the conditioning as well. I can just recover better, but that's a different topic. I've just better calibrated what's happening internally, external output, the whole shebang, right? Now, some of you, sorry, I'm going to go back. There is another thing I want to talk about, which is the ratio between stimulus and fatigue. Not all exercises are the same, right? You could probably do bicep curls every day, but you couldn't do squats every day. In fact, if you could do squats every day, I would argue, and you were working to the effort level that I've said, you're not basically. It would be a lot of volume and you wouldn't be able to recover from it. Okay, so not all exercises are the same. And then on an individual basis, some exercises absolutely kill some people. For example, me squatting at 6 foot versus somebody squatting at 5'6". That bar is just moving further, so I'm accumulating more fatigue. So I might just be like, after a squat session, it may take me 4 days to recover, whereas somebody else might be only 2 days. And that might be because of the distance they're moving it. Maybe it's an efficiency thing. And some of it is just because mentally they just enjoy those kinds of things a little bit more. And yeah, so the stimulus to fatigue ratio is something that you are also thinking about, because we are trying to create an environment, an anabolic environment, and elicit hypertrophy, right? Which means muscle growth. But if your exercises are so hard, all right, that they are causing you a huge amount of fatigue, which means that you then can't go on to do the volume that you need to do and add weight to the bar, then you're not doing progressive overload, and this is a problem. I'll give you another example. If you have a squat like mine, a lot of the time it looks a little bit like a deadlift. Quite backy, quite hingy. I don't have one of those beautiful knees over toes, straight up and down squats. Now, some of that is to do with the length of my femur. Some of it is to do with the fact that I'm just shit at squatting. Some of it's to do with ankle mobility for a different time. But those kinds of squats, when I have both my pelvis not just moving up and down like that in a squat, but it's actually moving back in space. And I'm actually going to stand up now. Here we go. I've lost it. If I squat and my squat looks like this, right? Not quite that bad, but I won't bury myself that much. I am going to be putting a lot more stress on my lower back and erectors, all right? And that is fatiguing. That is fatiguing for me, which means I then might not be able to go on and produce. If I did a squat on a Monday, and if I have deadlifts on a Wednesday, because my back has already had to work so much doing the squats, I might have to just accept that I might not be able to produce my highest efforts on that deadlift. Yeah? And if my deadlift is something that I really want to be focusing on, I need to be aware of controlling the amount of volume I do on the squat, because I use my back so much in my squat. All right? So this idea of stimulus to fatigue ratio, you do need to pay attention to, because some things work better for different people for reasons that I've just described. Now, when you're on a group program, obviously I haven't assessed all of you and just giving it out. But some of you might be like, I'm absolutely fucking loving this program, it's great. And other people might be like, oh mate, it's fucking slamming me. And that's not necessarily because there's a big discrepancy in strength or fitness. It might just be because of the exercises that I've selected are just the ratio is not optimal for you. All right. How do you know? Well, if the next day you're fucking sore and you're like sort of getting worse throughout the week, rather than just being able to kind of go in and produce similar sorts of efforts each time, it may be that the ratios are off. If I was working with you one-to-one, we would be able to talk about that and we could make better exercise selections. And I hope the squat and the deadlift thing made sense there. Did that make sense? Yeah? Or sort of? We can ask questions at the end. So I think that's kind of it. The main bit is the RPE and the RIR. If you're like me and you're a bit of a pussy, they're useful because I tend to underwork. And when you're training, you can't afford to underwork because we need to see progress. We've set the trajectory, we want to get big and we want to get strong. And so therefore we need to put in enough stimulus to create that anabolic environment. And we use these scales in order to make sure. If you've never seen these scales before and you're like, I'm not sure, start filming yourself. Start filming yourself. And if I've said, I want you to go 2 reps, or I want you to work to 2 reps before failure, film and ask yourself did my internal feeling match what was happening outside? 2 reps before failure should look like it should be like slow, but you're like, I could definitely do 2 more. All right. If you're still doing the reps the way you were doing it on rep 1, probably not. All right. But you will get better. The longer you're in the gym, the longer you use these scales, the better you'll get at it. All right. When you think about whether these, what if you're like overreaching? Well, you can then use soreness. If you're really, really sore after every workout, it might be because you're working at a too higher effort. You're working in that sort of 0 R, well, not 0, maybe 1 rep before failure, or you're working at an RPE of 9 or 10, not 10 because you would know because it would be failure, but that's not necessary for growth. All right. 2 to 4 reps before failure, or somewhere like sort of 8.5 RPE. The powerlifters like to do halves as well. And just to be aware that, stimulus to fatigue ratio, because of the way, and I'll use my squat again, because of the way my squat is, and it uses a lot of my back, that impacts down the line what I can do for other hinge movements that I might have in the week, like deadlifts and so on. And so I need to pay attention to that from a sort of maybe like when I zoom out of my program and I think about it on a week to week and a month to month basis, rather than just the session. How does that exercise selection fit in with the rest of the stuff that I'm doing? So if I squat heavy on a Monday, I know that's going to be quite fatiguing for my back because of the way that I do it. The stimulus to fatigue ratio is high. So then I don't deadlift then until Friday because then I've had adequate, and that means that both of those movements then I can put a lot of effort into. Yeah? But that won't be the same for everybody because we're all different shapes and sizes. It got better there towards the end when I did the recap. Namaste. Right, that's it. So, questions that came up there from you two that are here? Anything? If they do come up and you're like, Ed, I think I saw you scribbling some stuff and you're like, this guy makes no fucking sense, or I need to go over that again, put it in the group. All right? Oh, I'm going to stop now.